My family believed my sister's lie, disowned me and let me rot. Now they want me to save them from homelessness. So I let them lose everything. Before I get into the meat of this episode, you should understand where I'm coming from. I, a 28-year-old male, grew up in what I thought was a stable family, upper-middle-class area in Chicago's suburbs. My parents appeared to have it together, at least on the surface. Dad worked as a financial advisor at a respected firm downtown, earning a solid living for our family. Mom worked part-time as a realtor, but she was more concerned with maintaining the family image, which entailed participating in every community group available and ensuring that our family looked great on Christmas cards. I was their biological son, the golden lad who did everything correctly. Straight A's without much work, naturally athletic and courteous to adults. I wasn't ideal by any means, and as a teenager, I got into a lot of problems, such as sneaking beers with friends and throwing the occasional loud party. But nothing significant. Nothing that would jeopardize the family reputation my mother fought so hard to uphold. When I was 10, they adopted Lily, a 3F at the time, because Mom had always wanted a daughter. I recall the day they brought her home, a tiny little thing with large brown eyes who had everyone wrapped around her finger in minutes. And I'll admit it, I was a bit of a jerk to her at first. Suddenly, I was no longer the center of attention. Everything revolved around Lily's first day in preschool, her dance recital, and her adorable new costume. Looking back, it was typical sibling envy, but at the moment, I felt supplanted. As we grew up, I thought we had a good sibling relationship. Nothing extraordinary, just average. We fought occasionally, but I was always looking out for her. When she was in second grade, a child began yanking her hair and pushed her on the playground. I was in ninth grade at the time, and I remember walking her to elementary school one day and having a pretty clear chat with the little punk. Nobody messed with her after that. I even taught her basic self-defense techniques, such as how to throw a proper punch if absolutely necessary. I was her older brother, you know. By my senior year of college, I was crushing it. Captain of our Division II baseball club, with promising possibilities for minor league baseball. Had a 3.85 GPA in business administration and a minor in finance. I had a strong set of pals, the type of guys who would help you move or pick you up at 3 a.m. Suppose your car broke down. I spent a lot of time in the gym, and I had been lifting seriously since high school. By college, I was in the best form of my life, bench pressing 315 for repetitions, squatting 405, and deadlifting 495. Everyone strives for that V-taper, which features broad shoulders, a small waist, and noticeable abs all year. I'm not trying to sound pompous here, simply painting a picture of where I was in life. I dated a couple girls seriously throughout the years, but nothing lasted. To be honest, I was mostly thinking about my future. Dad had connections at many Chicago area investment businesses, and following graduation, I was scheduled to begin a management training program at one of the largest. My plan was simple. Graduate high school, maybe play baseball for a few more years if I had the opportunity, and then pursue a career in finance. Eventually, meet the proper girl, marry, have children, and live the American dream. That was the plan anyway. By then, Lily was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school. She developed into this artistic theater kid who was usually in a school play and overly overreacted to everything. But that's what teens are like. She has her own friends and life. When I came home from college on breaks, we'd get together for supper and catch up on usual sister stuff. Or so I thought. Looking back, there were signals I overlooked, such as her jealousy when Mom and Dad bragged about my baseball accomplishments, her tiny remarks about how easy I had it, and her tendency to make up intricate stories about things that happened at school that couldn't possibly be genuine. But hindsight is 20/20, right? It was a Tuesday in October during my senior year. I just concluded a terrible session in which coach worked us into the ground after we lost a weekend series to our main rivals. My legs felt like jelly, and my shoulder was sore from too many bullpen sessions, but in a nice way. Like you pushed your body to its limits, and it replied. I took a shower, dressed into pants and a hoodie, and checked my phone on the way out to my truck, which was the F-150 my parents had helped me buy for my 20th birthday. Holy 37 missed calls, 54 texts. Messages from family members and friends included phrases like, "You sick, how could you," and "You're dead." My heart began beating quickly. My first assumption was that somebody had died, either grandma or grandpa. I dialed Dad immediately. "What the hell is going on?" I inquired. When he responded, his voice was icy frigid, which I had never heard before. "Get your ass home now, don't you dare go anywhere else." Then he hung up. I stopped in the parking lot, staring at my phone, trying to figure out what was going on. I called Mom and she answered. I called my best friend from high school, who still lived near my parents, and he didn't answer either. It was as if everyone had just decided I was radioactive. I drove the 20 minutes home in a haze, my stomach in knots the entire time. NPR was on the radio, but I couldn't hear a word they were saying. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw my Uncle Mike's vehicle and several other cars. Uncle Mike, my father's younger brother and a construction contractor with a temper, had never warmed up to me. Before I could get out, Uncle Mike raced at me from the front porch, wrenched open my truck door, grabbed my shirt and pushed me against the side of the truck. "I'm going to kill you," he yelled, inches from my face. His spit touched my face, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. His eyes were wild, unlike anything I had ever seen before. I could have easily broken free. Mike was 50 and out of shape, and I was a 22-year-old athlete in my prime, but I was too stunned to respond. Dad and my other uncle Steve pushed him away from me. "Inside, now," Dad said, without looking me in the eyes. I stepped up the front stairs and entered the living room. It was packed. Mom was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and swollen from sobbing. Both sets of grandparents were present, looking dismal. Aunts, uncles, and even close family friends. And Lily, my sister, was curled up against Grandma, sobbing into her shoulder. When I walked in, the place went completely silent. Everyone stared at me with dread and disdain, which made my blood run cold. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted, scanning the room for any clues as to what was happening. Mom looked up, her face twisted with fury and loathing, which I had never seen before. "How could you? Your own sister." "What are you talking about?" I asked, seeking around for an explanation. Dad moved forward, his normally cool attitude as a financial consultant gone. He seemed to want to tear me apart with his bare hands. "Lily told us everything, about how you've been coming into her room at night, for years." The accusation struck me like a freight train. I could not breathe. The room began spinning. "What? That's insane. I never touched her." Lily was sobbing harder now. "You said no one would believe me. You said you'd hurt me if I told you. You said it was our secret." "That's," I screamed, my amazement giving way to rage. "I've never said that. I've never done anything to her. What the hell is going on?" Uncle Mike lunged at me again, but was stopped by Dad and Uncle Steve. "My buddy's a cop. You're going to prison, you piece of sauerkraut. They're going to love you there." I attempted to explain myself and show them how ludicrous this was, but it was like talking to a stone wall. Nobody was listening. Lily started remembering more facts and making up stuff that never happened. She claimed I first touched her when she was 10 and I was home from high school for Christmas vacation. They claimed it had happened countless times since then. I said I would hurt her, Mom and Dad, if she told anyone. She lied about everything she said, but they were all nodding, comforting her, and glaring at me. It felt weird, like I'd slipped into an alternate reality where everything was reversed. Then Dad snapped. He had always been controlled and never violent. But something broke in him. He stepped straight up to me and delivered a right hook that would make heavyweight boxers proud. Caught me square in the jaw, and I fell, tasting blood where my teeth had sliced into my cheek. "Get your things and get out. You're no son of mine," he shouted, standing over me and flexing his hand. Mom had already packed some of my clothes into trash bags. They were near the door. Dad grabbed my wallet and took out all of the cards with his name on it, including credit cards and health insurance. "Dad, please. This isn't true," I begged as blood dripped from my broken lip. "You've known me my whole life. You know I would never do something like this." He grabbed my shirt, hauled me to the door, and flung me down the front steps. I landed hard on my shoulder and felt something crack, which turned out to be a slight separation. The packages of clothing followed. Then my baseball gear. "If you ever come near this family again, I'll kill you myself," he said, slamming the door. I sat on the lawn, blood on my face, shoulder hurting, and neighbors peeking through windows at the ruckus. My entire existence had just collapsed in less than an hour. That night I sat in my truck in the baseball field parking lot, trying to understand what had occurred. Couldn't sleep. I kept repeating the scenario, trying to figure out how Lily could do this, and how my parents could trust her without questioning it. By morning my jaw was swollen and purple, and my shoulder hurt so much that I could hardly move my arm. I called a teammate, Ryan, and he let me crash on his couch for a week. His roommates were not happy about it, but they tolerated me. I tried calling, texting and emailing everyone in my family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and folks I'd known all my life. No responses. Except for one message from Dad. Contact us again and I'll file a restraining order. You are no longer alive for us. Ryan tried to help. Dude, you need to go to the police. File a report about your dad hitting you. Get ahead of this thing. But I could not. Something inside of me refused to realize that this was actually happening. I kept expecting my folks would come to their senses and see how absurd it was. And honestly, I was terrified. What if Lily did not back down? What if they believed her instead of me? How would I prove in the negative that I did not do something? 2 weeks later, I received an email from the university. My tuition payment for the semester was late. My parents had canceled the midterm. I went to the financial assistance office and tried to secure an emergency loan. But without a co-signer and with little credit history, I was screwed. I had to lower the majority of my classes to part-time status so that I could work full-time to afford even that. Coach was understanding at first and allowed me to stay on the team. But I missed so many practices due to my new job as security at a bar that I seldom played. My grades plummeted. Went from dean's list to barely passing. Friends began avoiding me because stories were flying. Someone in the family told someone, who then told someone else. You know how it goes. Nobody branded me a predator in front of me, but I noticed how people looked at me. How discussions paused when I entered rooms, and how girls would move away if I sat next to them in class. 4 months later, my truck broke down. The engine block has cracked. There are thousands to repair. Could not afford it. I lost my delivery work, which I had picked up on top of the bar security gig. I was evicted from the rundown apartment I shared with 2 other guys because I couldn't afford to pay the rent. I started sleeping in the baseball team's equipment shed after Coach gave me the code. Taking a shower in the locker room. I'm eating 1 meal per day at the cafeteria with the last of my meal plan. Coach spotted me there one night in February. It was below zero outdoors, and I was dressed in 3 hoodies and a sleeping bag, using my duffel bag as a cushion. Instead of getting angry, he sat down next to me on the floor. Son, what the hell happened to you? He inquired, his tone genuine and concerned. I told him everything, the accusation, my parents' reaction, being cut off, I'm losing my truck, the apartment. He was the first person to actually hear the entire story. When I finished, he did not accuse me of lying. He did not say he believed me either. Just nodded and sat in silence for a minute. You can stay here until the end of the semester. After that, I'll help you figure something out. The following day, he brought me a space heater and a good air mattress. He started inviting me to dinner at his house once a week. His wife would always pack leftovers for me to take home. It was not much, but it was something. Someone cares. I finished the year with a 2.1 GPA and just avoided academic probation. But I was finished with baseball. The fire was out. Coach set me up with a summer job at a wilderness program for troubled kids in Colorado. It's ironic, right? However, it paid cash, gave shelter in a staff cabin, and kept me nourished. That fall, I did not return to school. Stayed in the wilderness program and became a full-time guide. Spent days hiking mountains and teaching survival skills to wealthy children whose parents had no idea what else to do with them. I rebuilt myself physically. Carrying 50-pound loads up mountains, chopping wood and erecting shelters were all physically taxing tasks. Gained 15 pounds of pure muscle in 6 months. At night, I'd get blackout drunk with the other guides. On days off, I experimented with anything I could get my hands on, including cannabis, LSD, mushrooms, and coke. Wasn't cautious. Didn't care. I was attempting to numb myself to the knowledge that my former life had vanished forever. After a guide died in a climbing mishap that I could have avoided if I hadn't been nursing a hangover, the program director approached me. Jake, you're one of our best guides. When you're on, the kids respect you. You know you're Salman in the field. But you're a liability when you're like this. I can't have you responsible for kids' lives when you're self-destructing. I got fired the next day. I spent the next year living in my new beater car, a 1998 Honda Civic that I purchased for $1,200 cash. I worked whatever jobs I could find, including bar bouncer, event security, day labor, and construction. Any position where I could exploit my size and no one asked too many questions about my past. I avoided women entirely. I avoided families. I would literally walk out of a restaurant if a child sat too close to my table. The worry of being implicated again was crippling. I had nightmares about being in prison and other inmates finding out what I was there for. I'd wake up in a cold sweat with my heart thumping so hard that I believed I was having a heart attack. One night, I worked security at a college pub in Fort Collins. I recognized a man from my old university who had played football while I was there. He recognized me too. He began informing his friends about who I was and what I was accused of doing. By the end, they were all looking at me and making comments loud enough for me to hear. Predator. Sick. Someone should teach him a lesson. I tried to ignore it. I did my job. At 2 a.m., I escorted the remaining guests out and was walking to my car when I jumped into the parking lot. 3 guys from earlier, they had been waiting. They called me a pedophile and a predator. They said they'd make sure I couldn't hurt anyone else. I fought back. Landed some solid punches. Definitely broke one of the guys' noses. But it was 3-on-1, and they had the element of surprise. I ended up with 3 broken ribs, a cracked eye socket, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion. The guy with the fractured nose must have freaked out since they rushed away when a car pulled into the parking lot. The driver contacted an ambulance. I spent 2 nights in the hospital and was released with nowhere to go, no health insurance, and a $17,000 medical bill that I couldn't pay. The medications they offered me scarcely relieved the ache. I couldn't work because of my injuries. I slept in my car in Walmart parking lots, taking sponge baths in gas station facilities when I could lift my arms. I decided I was finished. Just finished. It was raining during the middle of the night. I traveled to an old bridge outside of town that was high enough for leaping. Parked my Civic, strolled to the center, and climbed over the railing. My ribs screamed in pain with each movement. I'm not sure how long I stood there for. Rain soaked me as I stared down at the black lake. I had my phone in my hand. No texts or phone calls for 3 years. My family maintains complete quiet. Nobody was coming to save me. Nobody cared if I lived or died. Bit cold for a swim, don't you think? The voice scared me so badly that I nearly slipped. I gripped the railing with my good arm, anguish coursing through my fractured ribs. Turned to see an elderly man in his 70s standing there in a raincoat, holding a fishing rod. "Go away," I murmured, my voice trembling. "Can't do that, son," he said calmly, as if we were having a regular talk on a beautiful day. "See, if I go away and you jump, that makes me responsible in a way. It's not your problem, it became my problem when I saw you. That's how life works." He moved closer, not menacing, but steady. "My name's Frank. Retired Marine Corps. Seen plenty of men at their breaking point. You want to tell me what's got you standing on the wrong side of this railing? You wouldn't understand. Try me." I'm not sure why, but I told him everything about the charge, getting thrown out, and the previous 3 years. Maybe because I assumed I'd die soon anyway. Perhaps because he was a stranger who didn't immediately treat me like a monster. Maybe because something in his eyes reminded me of my grandfather, the only person in my family who would have believed me if he hadn't been suffering from dementia. When I finished, he simply nodded, just like my previous coach did. Then he said something that I will never forget. "Son, you've been carrying this alone long enough. Put down the weight for one night. Come have a hot meal, dry clothes, and we'll talk about it with clear heads tomorrow." Why would you help someone like me? You don't know if I'm telling the truth. Frank's eyes were acute, even in low light. Been reading men's faces for 50 years, in combat and in peace. You're either telling the truth, or you're the best damn liar I've ever met. Either way, death is permanent. Food isn't. I could have ignored him. Could have jumped anyway. Sometimes I wonder why I didn't. But something about his conviction, his calm in the face of my storm, compelled me to climb back over that rail. Frank's home was small, yet tidy. Everything was done with military precision. Books were neatly positioned on shelves, and shoes were parallel to the entrance. He offered me dry clothes belonging to his son, who had died in Afghanistan 10 years prior. He made me take a hot shower while he cooked. That night, I fell asleep on Frank's couch. Actually, I slept for the first time in what seemed like years. The next morning, he prepared me breakfast: eggs, bacon, and coffee so strong it might rouse the dead. He then offered me a job. He claimed to own a small security agency that provided executive protection, event security, and other specialized services to rich clientele. We needed a young, robust guy who could follow orders and keep his lips shut. "Why would you trust me with something like that?" I requested an explanation. "You just met me. I was about to kill myself." Frank looked me dead in the eyes. Because a man pushed to the edge, who chooses to step back, has something worth living for even if he doesn't know it yet. And because if you screw me over, I know exactly how to find you. For the next 6 months I resided in Frank's guest room while working for his company. He was a hard ass at 5 a.m. Workouts, tight regulations, and no alcohol on work nights. Made me go to the doctor for my injuries. He paid the bills himself, stating I'd repay him once I got back on my feet. But he was fair. They paid me generously. They taught me about finance, investing, how to dress and interact with clients, and how to be professional again. He also insisted that I see a therapist, an old Vietnam vet pal of his who specializes in PTSD. I resisted at first, but Frank would not take no for an answer. You got your bell rung, son, not just physically. Need to get your head straight if you're going to work for me. The therapy was helpful. Slowly. Taught me that what happened was not my fault, that I didn't deserve it, and that I wasn't irreparably damaged. After 6 months, I had saved enough money to buy my own house. A tiny apartment. Nothing fancy, just mine. Clean and safe. I began taking business management programs at my community college, as well as some specific security certificates. Frank began to resemble the father I had lost. He never pressured me to contact my family. Never advised that I attempt to clear my name. He simply said, "Some battles aren't worth fighting. Focus on the war building a life they can't take away from you." After a year of working for Frank, he assigned me to oversee security for his niece's art gallery opening. He said it was a favor for his sister, but I now realize he was playing matchmaking. Sophie was not what I expected. Frank had described her as smart as a whip and doesn't take scamarks from anyone, which was correct, but not complete. She was attractive in an unusual way, tall and athletic with bright green eyes that appeared to see right through you. Dark hair was cut in an asymmetrical way that elegantly framed her features. Not conventionally attractive in a magazine cover style, but stunning in the sense that she commands attention simply by being present. We didn't hit it off right away. She assumed I was merely a muscle-bound security guard with no intelligence. I assumed she was a stuck-up art snob. During the event, I overheard her explaining an abstract painting to a possible customer, then rolling her eyes when they left without buying. "Not everyone gets it," I responded, not intending to initiate a conversation. She looked me over and down, taking in my security suit. "And you do?" "Not really. But I'm not pretending to either." She nearly smiled. Almost. Honesty. Refreshing. Throughout the night, I noticed her observing me. Not in a, make sure the security guy isn't stealing anything manner, but with interest. I was doing my job, scanning the room, checking the doors, and keeping an eye on the more expensive items. Professional, alert, but inconspicuous. She approached me at the end of the night, just as I was finishing up and the last people were leaving. "So, Uncle Frank says you're more than just the muscle." "Your uncle talks too much," I responded. She laughed. It was a genuine nice laugh, not the phony social chuckle I had heard all evening. "Actually, he barely talks at all, which is why when he does, people listen. He says you're going to school." "Business management, yeah. Plus some specialized security certifications." "Interesting combination. Tell me about it." We spoke till 2 a.m., almost everything except my past. She was intelligent, humorous, and challenging in all the right ways. I have traveled a lot. Had strong beliefs on art, politics, and music, but also listened to my point of view. When I eventually explained that I needed to leave because I had an early training session with a new customer, she handed me her card. "I have a security issue at my condo. Locks need upgrading. Maybe you could give me a consultation." It was a clear justification, yet I accepted it. That consultation evolved into dinner, then movie nights, and then weekends together. Sophie was unlike anyone I had ever dated. Fiercely independent, dedicated to her profession, but vulnerable at quiet moments. She had been injured, but not in the same manner that I had been, because pain recognizes pain. For months I avoided discussing my family. When she asked, I made up some hazy stories. They claimed my parents had died in a vehicle accident. That I was an only child. Sophie sensed I was hiding something, but she didn't press. But Frank insisted that I come clean. "That girl is falling for you," he said one day at work as we were organizing security for an impending event. "And you're falling for her. She deserves the truth before it goes any further." He was correct. So, one evening over supper at my flat, I told her everything. The entire terrible story. I expected her to depart. To look at me differently. To suspect that Lily hadn't been lying. Instead, she held my hand across the table and said, "Thank you for trusting me. I believe you." Except for Frank. No one else had said these 3 words to me. I broke down at the dinner table, sobbing like a child. She simply hugged me and allowed me to express myself completely. 2 years after we met, I proposed. Did it right down on one knee, in the same area where we had our first actual date, ring in hand, heart racing. Frank led her down the aisle because her own father had died years before. We purchased a little home in a quiet neighborhood. Started creating a real life. I finished my degree and became a partner in Frank's firm. We moved from local security to regional and ultimately national contracts, built a reputation for professionalism and confidentiality. Sophie's artistic career took off. Her work first appeared in big galleries, fetching high prices. We talked about starting a family. I was finally happy. Finally at ease. Nightmares were less frequent. I could be near youngsters without panicking. I even reunited with a couple old college pals who contacted out after hearing pieces of the true story from common acquaintances. My past life felt distant, like if it had happened to someone else. I still think about my family. I wondered if they had ever doubted Lily's account. If they ever regretted what they did. But I had accepted that chapter as closed. I had a new family now, individuals who picked and supported me. That was sufficient. Or so I thought. It was a random Tuesday in March. I was in my office studying security protocols for an upcoming client event with a billionaire tech CEO who was visiting for a conference and needed discreet security. My assistant buzzed me on the intercom. "Sir, you have a call on line 1. Woman wouldn't give her name but says it's a family emergency." My first thought was Sophie, or Frank. "Put her through." I took up the receiver. "Hello, this is Jake," is definitely not my true name. Silence. Then a sob. "Jake, it's Mom." My body became frigid. I hadn't heard her voice in 7 years. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to shout. Instead, I just said, "What do you want?" "Please don't hang up," she begged. "We need to talk to you. It's important." "We haven't spoken in 7 years. Nothing could be that important." My voice sounded icy. Lily confessed. She lied about everything. She made it all up. The world came to a stop. 7 years of suffering. I'm talking about starting over. About dreams, panic attacks, and therapy. All due to a falsehood. I knew it was a lie, but hearing her acknowledge it. "Jake, are you there?" I hung up. I walked out of the office. I told my assistant to cancel my meetings and drove to Frank's house. After I told him, he simply nodded and said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do. You just don't know if it's the right thing." He was correct. Part of me wished to ignore them. Keep them out of my life permanently. Another segment required answers. I needed to hear the truth spoken directly to my face. Sophie felt the same way when I told her that night. "You need closure," she explained. "But whatever you decide, I'm with you. And Jake, this doesn't change anything between us. I'm still here, no matter what." For 2 weeks I ignored the calls and texts that began to come in from Mom, Dad, and even relatives who had cut me off years before. I talked it out with my therapist. Yes, I've got one. Not embarrassed to confess it. Finally I knew I had to confront them, only on my terms. I texted my mother, a public place. Coffee shop on Main Street. Sunday. 2 p.m. "It's just you, Dad, and Lily. I'll have folks with me. Only one chance." Sunday came. Frank insisted on coming as backup. Sophie was by my side, holding my hand so tightly that it almost ached. We arrived early. I took a table in the corner so that I could see all of the entrances and exits, an old security habit that never goes away. My stomach was knotted. Part of me still expected them not to appear, or that this was some sophisticated ruse. Sophie continued to check on me, her eyes filled with anxiety. "We can leave any time, okay? Just say the word." They came precisely at 2 o'clock. Mom seemed older than I remembered. Hair is grayer than brown now, and the face is creased with worry. Dad had lost so much weight that he appeared emaciated. His costly clothes were replaced with khakis and a worn-out button-down. Lily, now 22, appeared very different from the teenager I recalled. Her face was slimmer. Her eyes were downcast. She lacked her usual theatrical flair. When Mom spotted me, her eyes welled up with tears, and she ran forward, arms wide for a hug. I took a step back, placing Sophie somewhat between us. "Sit." No one spoke for what seemed like minutes. Eventually, Dad cleared his throat. "Son, I'm not your son," I interrupted him. You made that very clear 7 years ago. Now talk. Why am I here? Mom began crying. Dad seemed broken. Lily was still staring at the floor. 3 months ago, Dad said, his voice tight. Lily called a family meeting. She said that she had lied about everything. I looked at Lily. Look at me. Slowly, she raised her eyes, which were crimson from crying. Why? My voice didn't sound like mine. She drew a hesitant breath. I was jealous. You were a perfect son. Everyone adored you as a star athlete and astute thinker. Mom and Dad gave you everything. I wanted them to love me more and pay attention to me. So you accused me of something that could have landed me in prison? Destroyed my whole life? The anger that I thought I had dealt with years ago returned. I didn't think it would go that far, she muttered. I figured they'd simply be furious with you and possibly ground you. But then everyone began asking questions, and I couldn't take it back. And then it just kept going. Everyone was extremely sweet to me, giving me things and making me feel special. I wasn't sure how to stop it. And you too? I looked at my parents. You kicked me out without even listening to me. Without proof. Dad attempted to explain. We believed we were protecting her. She was our little girl. And I was your son. I slapped my hand on the table, and the entire coffee shop became silent. The people at neighboring tables tried not to hear, but they were all ears. I wasn't even home for the 4th of July weekend, she claimed. I was at a baseball tournament in Denver, and there were pictures all over social media. Did you even check? Mom placed her palm over her mouth. Dad became pale. You know what happened after you threw me out? My truck broke down. I lost my apartment. I slept in the baseball equipment shed. I almost died from exposure, from being beaten up by people who heard rumors. I stood on a bridge, ready to jump, because the family who was supposed to love me believed the worst without a single question. I took out my phone. I showed them images of myself with a black eye and a split lip from the bar brawl, me appearing gaunt during my homeless period, and my hospital documents from the beating. I was your son. My voice broke. Sophie squeezed my hand. Frank put his hand on my shoulder to ground me. We're very sorry, Mom wept. We made a terrible mistake. We want to make it right. Make it right? I chuckled, but it wasn't funny. How exactly do you plan to do that? Give me back 7 years of my life? Erase the nightmares? Undo the trauma of being homeless, of being beaten, of standing on that bridge ready to die? Mom was sobbing non-stop now. Dad appeared to have aged 10 years within the last 5 minutes. We want you to come home, Dad continued, his voice barely audible. We want our family back together. That is not going to happen. I already have a family. I looked at Sophie and Frank. People who actually stood by me. Lily eventually spoke up. There's something else you should know. She explained how, following her confession, everything changed. My parents had cut her off financially, sold the automobile they had purchased for her 16th birthday, a BMW, while I was sleeping in my truck. She had to drop out of her pricey private university and work in retail while attending night classes at a community college. Dad's business had deteriorated as a result of some bad investments, and they were forced to downsize from their large house to an apartment. Mom's social standing in the town was damaged when word spread about Lily's deception. We need your help, Jake, Mom acknowledged, finally appearing embarrassed. Your father's business is struggling. We're going to lose the condo. Lily can't afford to continue school. We've had to sell almost everything. So there it was. They did not want forgiveness. They wanted money. I began laughing. I couldn't help it. Let me get this straight. You destroy my life, disown me, leave me homeless. And now that I've managed to build a successful life despite you, you want me to bail you out? We're family, Dad murmured softly. We're not. I stood up. You made your choice 7 years ago. Now you can live with it. Please, Lily implored, tears running down her cheeks. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Mom and Dad shouldn't suffer for my mistake. You're right. They should suffer for their mistake. I looked at my parents. I forgive Lily. She was a child who made a terrible choice. But you two were adults who should have protected both your children. Instead, you threw one away without a second thought. I placed money on the table for our coffee. As we were leaving, Mom grabbed my arm. Please don't leave it like this. What can we do? What do you want from us? I gazed at her for a long time. I want you to remember how it feels to have everything taken away. To feel helpless. To have no one believe in you. Maybe then you'll understand what you did to me. Sophie, Frank and I walked out. As we approached the automobile, Frank squeezed my shoulder. Proud of you, son. That happened 2 years ago. I learned via mutual acquaintances that my parents lost their condominium. Dad currently works in a big box shop. Mom cleans homes. Lily dropped out of school entirely and relocated to another state. Sometimes I consider reaching out. Sophie says that would be the final step in my healing forgiveness, not for their benefit, but for my own. Frank says it's my decision, and he'll support me anyway. For the time being, my primary focus is on my own family. Sophie is pregnant with our first child. We are expanding the security firm to 3 more states. Create something real that cannot be taken away. Edit 2. To answer some popular questions, yes, I contemplated filing charges against Lily for false claims, but the statute of limitations in my state has expired. No, I don't feel horrible about not supporting my parents financially. They made the bed. And, yeah, Sophie is doing well with her pregnancy, thanks for asking. Edit number 3. Many of you think I should aid Lily because she was only a child when this happened. Maybe you are right. But she was 15. Not 5 years old enough to understand what she was doing. She let me suffer for 7 years before coming clean. That being said, I might contact her someday, simply not ready yet. Edit 4. For those wondering if I'll let my parents meet their grandchild, I honestly don't know. Will they be in the delivery room? Absolutely not. Will they ever babysit? Hell no. But maybe supervised visits eventually, when I'm confident they won't poison my child against me with further falsehoods, and only if they have significant therapy and accept full responsibility. Edit 5. Some are calling this report a hoax. Whatever, believe in everything you want. Why would I make something up? I came here to process and perhaps help others who have been wrongly accused, not for internet points. Edit 6. Thank you to everyone who shared their comparable experiences in the comments. It helps knowing that I'm not alone in this. And to the person who asked why I don't hate all women anymore. I'm not an incel who believes that one person's acts define the entire gender. In case you didn't realize, my wife is a woman.